everyone, and welcome to another video on introduction to law, health and the law. Okay, so firstly, we're going to do a case study. So meet Lucy. Lucy is a 13-year-old, and she's 8 weeks pregnant. She recently found out that she's HIV positive. Her mother is a single parent who takes care of her and her 3 siblings. She's concerned about the following. Her mom cannot afford a medication to treat her HIV infection. She wants to get an abortion without her mother knowing. She visits the local clinic and is advised that she is not eligible for free medication since her HIV infection is still early stages. After this conversation, she loses the nerve to ask whether she can request an abortion without her mother's knowledge. Okay, so how is the law applicable in this case? Is the situation regulated by public or private law? Is it a civil or a criminal matter? What sources of South African law would you use to research this scenario? Okay, so we'll answer this after this lecture. Okay, so another case is meet Lucas. He's arrested because there was reason to believe that he's involved with an armed robbery. There's eyewitnesses. Lucas fled the scene of the crime before the police arrived. Claimed the wounds were due to nature of his job in the construction sites. X-rays revealed a clearly visible bullet lodged in his arm. Lucas claimed it was an old bullet wound from when he was shot during a hijacking. After investigation, no proof of the hijacking was found. And also the surgeon confirmed that the bullet can be removed easily under general anesthesia. Lucas refuses to remove the bullets on grounds of his constitutional rights. So also what legal issues is applicable? Is there a violation of Lucas's rights if they force him into the operation? Is it a public or private law, civil or criminal? Okay, so firstly we have to define the law. So the law can be defined as the following. It can be considered a system of rules which seek to control or regulate the behavior of citizens in a politically organized society by prescribing what is acceptable conduct. So therefore, by ignoring or disobeying the law, we might be prosecuted or punished. So the law is basically to keep everything civilized. That's the job of the law. So human rights is primarily there to protect individuals from state power, and every person is born with human rights. And later on we're going to look at the 3 main fundamental human rights. Okay, so next is the divisions of South African law. So there's basically 2 divisions. It's public law or private law. Public law is when there's a disagreement between the state and a subject, so between the state and an individual. This is public law, and this is normally unequal because of state power and things like that. So it's when there's a relationship between the state and a subject, a citizen. This is public law. Private law is a relationship between 2 people. It's a relationship between 2 citizens. An example of this is like when someone's involved in a car accident, who's liable for damages, who was in the wrong, and things like that. This is private law, and it's a more of an equal relationship. Also, it has to be noted that in public law, the state has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and also the outcome of the court will be guilty or not guilty. Whereas in the private law, the outcome will be of monetary value or compensation, and also the judgment is not based on reasonable doubt, but it's based on probabilities, which account is more probable to be right. Okay, so there's also a national law. It's a law of patrimony and a subsection law of obligations, which states the law of contract and the law of delict. The law of delict is very important for healthcare students and health professionals, due to the fact it is when someone acts in a negligent manner and causes harm, that person will be liable to damages. Okay, so also, public law is a criminal case because it's the state against a subject, the case against a citizen. So it's a criminal case. Civil cases is person against person. This is civil cases. So let's look at a criminal case. So yeah, when is it a criminal case? When a wrong against the state has been committed, and the purpose is to charge or to punish someone for an offense. And the outcome is always guilty or not guilty, as I mentioned previously. And also guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So the state has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a criminal case. Then let's look at a civil case. A civil case, when does this occur? When an individual right has been infringed by another individual. So it's person against person or individual against individual. And the purpose is to claim damages, compensation, monetary value. And the outcome is compensation, monetary value. And the proof isn't beyond a reasonable doubt. It is on a balance of probabilities. So someone of power, a judge, will decide which side is more probable to be right. Okay. Then the sources of South African law. What are the sources of South African law? You get primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources are binding, and secondary sources is just persuasive. It's not binding. So let's look at the hierarchy of primary sources of law. The biggest one is the Constitution of South Africa. This is the main law of South Africa. And you can't breach this Constitution of South Africa. Then it's legislation, and then after this is case law, common law. They are the same thing. Case law is common law, and then after that it's the customary law. Okay, so let's look at the hierarchy again. So right at the top, it is the Constitution. Then secondly, it's legislation, which is acts and statutes. After this, it's common law, and after this, or case law, and after this, it's customary law. So that's the hierarchy, and it's very important to know the hierarchy because if you are within your rights in the statutes, but you're not within your rights in the Constitution carries a bigger weight. Therefore, it's very important to know the Constitution. Okay, so the hierarchy of courts. What is the hierarchy of courts in South Africa? It's also very important to know this. So right at the top, you get your Constitutional Court. This is the biggest court in South Africa. It's the Constitutional Court. Right behind the Constitutional Court, you get the SCA, which is the Supreme Court of Appeals, which is situated in Bloemfontein. Then you get your High Court. Then you get your Magistrate Court, which is the lowest court in South Africa. You get two types of magistrate courts. You get a District Magistrate Court and a Regional Magistrate Court. The District Magistrate Court can hear cases up to 400,000 rand, whereas a regional, 200,000 rand, whereas a Regional Magistrate Court can hear cases up to 400,000 rand in value. Okay, so developing legal skills. So how do you read legislation? So it's pretty straightforward. The first number that you see without the brackets, this is the section. Then the second number you see within the brackets, this is the subsection. Then the letter that you see in brackets, this is the paragraph. And then the Roman number that you see in brackets, this is the subparagraph. So it's pretty straightforward to read legislation. So it's section, subsection, paragraph, subparagraph. Okay, then also reading a case citation. So when you see a case citation, how do you know how to find it? Well, it's also pretty straightforward. So this is a case of the Minister of Health against TAC. So the first number, 2002, that's the year the case was held. 5 is the volume. It's the volume where you can find this case. The SA just stands for SA Law Report. And this number, that 721, is just for the page number. And CC is where the case was heard. So that's the Constitutional Court. If you could look at this one at the top as well. So 1999 is the year, 4 is the volume, SA is SA Law Reports, 539 is the page number, and SCA is the court, which is the Supreme Court of Appeals in Bloemfontein. Okay. So it's pretty straightforward, easy. Okay, then nextly is the 3 generations of human rights. What are the 3 generations of human rights? Okay, So the first generation is called political and civil rights. This is normally referred to as blue rights. Then the second one is second generation rights, and this is socio-economic rights, which is also referred to as red rights. Red rights. And the third one is the third generation rights, which is cultural rights, and this is normally referred to as green rights. So what is the blue rights, or the political and civil rights? This is like the right to freedom of speech, the right to dignity, the right to life, the right to equality, association, and religion. So this is the first generation rights. So pretty straightforward. Then the socio-economic rights, which is called the red rights. This is like the right to education, the right to medical assistance or medical care, and the right to housing. This is socio-economic rights. And then cultural rights, which is your green rights. It's just the right to have a healthy living environment. Okay, then the doctor-patient relationship. So this is also pretty straightforward. It's the duties the doctor has towards the patient and the patient's duties. Okay, so let's get back to the case studies. Is the laws. Is the law, bioethics, and human rights applicable to this case? Yes, the laws are applicable to both these cases. And the divisions of law, both of them is going to be public law. It's the state against a person and a person against the state. So it's public law. Is it civil or criminal? It's definitely both criminal cases. And the sources of law will be primary sources of the constitution and legislation, and the generations of HR. In my opinion, is that Lucas's human rights that was violated would be the blue rights, is the rights to political and civil rights. And in Lucy's case, it will be socio-economic rights because medical treatment wasn't given. Whereas in Lucas's case, I feel like his dignity is taken away by forcing him into doing an operation that he doesn't want to do. So yeah, cool. Thank you for listening to this video, and like and subscribe.